Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Kayla Bowen, Digital Marketing Specialist for Byram Healthcare, and today we're going to be discussing summer wellness strategies. And I'm joined by two returning experts, Jennifer Smith and Dana Roseman, to dive into the unique challenges that summer can bring for people living with diabetes and how to manage them with confidence. Byram Healthcare has been a national leader in patient direct medical supply delivery for over 50 years. We're proud to be rated the best overall diabetic supply company by Verywell Health for 4 years in a row, and we hold an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. At Byram, we know that life takes care, and today's session is one way we support our community in thriving every day. Before we begin, please note that nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Our discussion is for informational purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment. Now let's jump into how you can stay safe, cool, and in control this summer with diabetes. So first, I would love for our guests to take a moment to tell you a little bit about themselves. So let's start with Dana.
Sure. I am Dana Roseman. I'm a certified care and education specialist. I'm also a registered dietitian, and I work at Integrated Diabetes Services as the Director of Technology and Applied Research. And I am currently talking to you from Dallas, Texas, which definitely gets its share of very hot temperatures. So definitely have some thoughts on this topic today.
All right, thank you. And now, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Smith. I have the pleasure of working with Dana at Integrated Diabetes Services. I am also a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. I'm the director of lifestyle and nutrition with Integrated. And while I am not in Texas, I am in southern Wisconsin, and the Midwest also gets very hot and humid. It's the time of the year that most people find it's the loveliest to be here, but we have our share of heat and humidity that we're living in right now. So certainly all the types of things along with insulin management. I also have type 1, so can live it as well as speak about it.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining today and for those introductions. So now let's jump into today's topic and talk about diabetes and summer challenges. So first, let's talk about how heat affects insulin sensitivity. Living in Texas, do you want to start talking about that, Dana?
Yeah, sure. So for people who take insulin, I think it's often noted that warm temperatures can contribute to causing some drops in blood sugars. When we're hot, our capillaries kind of expand, our circulatory system expands and absorbs the insulin a little differently than when we're cold, and those capillaries are very tight and constricted. And so people can notice a little bit more variability in their blood sugars based on their insulin that they normally take. And we call that insulin sensitivity or increased insulin sensitivity. And so being aware of that can help you manage your insulin doses, especially during active times when you're doing a little bit more fun activities, maybe in the pool, going on the lake, being a little bit more active.
What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say same thing. Really, it's just relative to the heat. It's the way that the body absorbs insulin, especially a lot faster. If you work outside or spend a heavy amount of your time outside, out of the air conditioned, it's also potential good practice to pay attention to the devices that you wear that hold your insulin. So we can pay attention to maybe you change your pump every 3 days, but in the heat, and especially again, if you're outside a good majority of the time, you might find that the insulin may degrade a bit faster depending on where you have your pump clipped or where you wear it. Changes in blood glucose levels always should be a sign in the summer of taking notice of how long has it been since you've changed your pump reservoir and the insulin inside of it. maybe going to changing your reservoir every 2 days, or changing your pump or your pod every 2 days instead of every 3 days. Just some things to pay attention to. For those who wear tube pumps, kind of trying to keep the tube tucked away rather than direct exposure in the sun can make some difference as well. And kind of goes into storage. You know, even if you're using injections and you're carrying insulin pens around, or you're carrying vials and syringes around with you, there's a lot of beach time, there's a lot of vacation time in the summer. And that too includes different types of storage opportunities, either just having something in, you know, a case that's got some ice in it, or buying one of the fancy packs. There are so many of them on the market. I don't even know how many I've typically gone.
So
I don't know
many.
how many you tried to use, Dana, but there are lots of them.
Yeah, and I think that's such a personal kind of convenience if you're traveling a lot, if you have access to you know, a cooler, maybe you put it in your car while you're taking a day trip or working outside. You know, a lot of people will have a cooler for lunches. For work, maybe you put your insulin in that also. But there are such a variety of tools and storage things that people can choose from. Some are high tech and some are just very simple in terms of just sticking some ice packs in your cooler.
Right. And if you're traveling via air and worried more about compliance and TSA rules and that kind of thing, there are quite a number of them that do have TSA clearance specific to the product.
Mhm.
So if you travel that way frequently, it's something to pay attention to, just so that you can bring those through in your carry-on. You never want to check any of your supplies that you really urgently might need, because you may not get them.
And one thing I might say is that we never want to put insulin directly on ice itself. We want to make sure that we're thinking about the span of temperature that insulin needs to be, which actually is sort of forgiving. Any range, you know, I say room temperature, which, you know, I think will just kind of speaks about if you're in an air conditioned climate consistently, your insulin's probably doing okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of what to pay attention to, then we're talking about storage and making sure that it is stored at the proper temperature, whether it's, you know, room temperature, or you've refrigerated it on the way and put it directly into a refrigerator once you get to your hotel or your beach location or whatever. But like, what do you pay attention to if you do think your insulin has gone bad? Like, what are some telltale signs? Those are important to pay attention to,
Absolutely.
right?
And so the way I kind of frame that is, you know, just you've got these blood sugars that are not responding to the insulin you're taking. I almost kind of feel like sometimes you're just putting water into your body and your blood sugars are just not responding to the amount of insulin you're putting in. And that obviously would be a thing to notice, and then change either the insulin and your technology, or all of it.
Right. Absolutely. And the pens, they have some fancy tools as well. We're talking about technology to help keep things. There are some pens and even some tools that you can just pop on that tell you a temperature range at which your item, your insulin, has been kept for a certain amount of time. And if it's exceeded that, it's probably a good idea to just switch it out without even trying to use that insulin, because you'd rather be safe than sorry.
Absolutely. Right.
Right. We have a question in the comments. Someone asked, how long can I keep an insulin pen not being cooled in the summer?
So I think that goes back to, are we in a refrigerated situation? Are we in an air conditioned situation? I know when I go traveling to hot climates, if I don't have consistent refrigeration, then I will keep it a shorter amount of time. Insulin is fine out of refrigeration up to about 30 days is the rule of thumb. But if that 30 days is, you know, with some heat impacting into the insulin, again, it's probably not worth keeping it. And something that's helpful is that if you do have you know, damaged insulin, depending on your insurance or your physician, you can get replacements for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how about dehydration and blood glucose? How do those play into each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think while we emphasize we, especially, within integrated, we really try to emphasize hydration, especially with water, and not too many other liquids. And that goes across, the span of 365 days of the year. But if you are in summer, you are more likely again to be perspiring more and losing a little bit more fluid from your body. And if you are somebody who is an active individual in warmer temperature, hydration needs definitely go up and can impact your blood sugar, mainly because if you think about water coming out of a faucet, right, the way that it's supposed to, nice and fluid, right, when we pull away fluid from that, it would get kind of stickier, really. So when we don't have as much hydration in our body, our blood tends to get thicker, almost like molasses in winter, so to speak. And only then are nutrients not being moved around your body as well as they should be, but your glucose can actually become more concentrated. So you have more potential for blood sugar levels to climb. If there's also, we just finished talking about insulin and storage. If insulin isn't working the way that it's supposed to, if you had faulty, problem with your technology or something and your blood sugar is climbing and you're not hydrated, that can lead to many more issues. And then with the technology we have today, one of them being CGMs, or continuous glucose monitors, they rely heavily on proper hydration in the body because they're measuring the glucose level that sits in our interstitial fluid, which is kind of the volume of fluid in between all of our cells. So again, if we don't have enough proper hydration, our CGM readings can be off. They can be inaccurate, which can lead to a lot of problems.
Right. Especially so many people are using automated insulin delivery systems. And I always say, I'm in Texas and football is reigning champion. So it's is very popular. So if your CGM is off, it's almost like not playing football without a quarterback. You don't know which way the insulin is being delivered. It kind of can really impact your insulin delivery and cause a lot of havoc, as Jenny said. So that for sure is important to remember.
Right.
I think something in the summertime too, all times of the year, especially if you are doing any type of athletic endeavor, right? But in the summertime, we often may be focusing on hydration and we might actually be overhydrating and getting less than the optimal levels of electrolytes, which help to balance a lot of things in our body well, right? So if you are outside exercising or are just a heavy sweater, make sure you have some compensation within your water with some electrolyte. The tablets, there are powders. Many of them, thankfully, today you can buy carbohydrate or sugar-free so that you really don't have to worry about it impacting blood sugar, but just maintaining that background for, sodium, potassium, all those things that.
And it's often even easy to make some electrolyte replacements at home with just some lemon water, some salt that you have, and maybe a little bit of juice. All of that is going to help you replace and maybe helps some people, especially if you don't love the taste of water, making a little bit of electrolytes in a sugar-free, carbohydrate-free way can really help to stay hydrated.
There's some cool water bottles now today that a little place in the bottom that you can put, crushed up like orange slices or strawberries or whatever. And again, it enhances the flavor. So you're not just plain old water.
Right. We call that spa water.
But
you can elevate it.
Yes, have some cucumber water. With
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are good tips. How about nutrition? How does that play into diabetes management in the summer?
Well, I think, as summer seems to kind of be connected with a lot more travel, maybe a lot more celebrations. We have holidays at the beginning and the end of summer, and that can oftentimes lead to sugary sweets, a lot of special traditions associated with that. And, working to determine your strategies for maybe some higher sugar foods, higher fat foods, and maybe putting some fun active activities around some of those treats can help you burn that sugar instead of taking extra insulin. There's definitely personalized ways to approach some of those nutrition challenges.
Absolutely. I think, the other thing that summer brings in many areas of the country is a wealth of good, fresh produce.
Right.
It's a nice way, a lot of people kind of go through the winter months a little less active, more sedentary, a little bit heartier types of food,
More
whereas
comfort food.
more comfort again, and maybe using a little bit more insulin, maybe not moving as much. So you might gain a little bit. Whereas in the summertime, it's very easy to typically find a farmer's market or a local stand, or even grocery stores in many of the bigger places carry some local produce. You can even grow some things pretty easily. I mean, we've got a big container of lettuce greens in our backyard it's easy, it's pretty low maintenance. Even in the heat, keep it in the shade, give it enough water. It's easy to pick from, but those are great ways to take advantage of in season. If you have the opportunity to grow, it decreases some of your grocery bill potentially. And because these foods tend to be low, what we call low glycemic or lower impact on your blood sugar, because they're not high carbohydrate, you're going to get a smoother blood sugar management. You're going to get lower insulin. You're going to remain more active, so lighter meals that also don't require heating up your kitchen can kind of be a nice way all around to just make it a little bit easier through the summertime.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, well, now that we've covered how heat and hydration and nutrition play a role in blood sugar stability during the summer months, let's talk about how movement, travel, and some other practical tips for staying on track through the summer. So let's start with physical activity. Jennifer, you want to tell me a little bit about how physical activity and heat affect blood sugar management?
Sure. I mean, we kind of condensed it a little bit, beginning with overall, it could impact your insulin, right? And the integrity of the insulin, really. So paying attention to that. But in general, because when we exercise in the heat, as Dana explained, our capillaries tend to kind of come closer to the surface of the skin, essentially the cooling effects of the body trying to perspire. It increases circulation whenever we move, which definitely enhances muscle uptake of glucose or sugar from your bloodstream. So overall, exercising in warmer temperature, especially cardiovascular exercise like walking, running, swimming, biking, they're going to have an impact on lowering your blood sugar. So if you are an insulin user, that means we have to think ahead. And while the technology we have today offers a lot more flexibility to life, planning still has its place. So, if you can be active, ideal times of day tend to be more in the morning in what we call a fasted state, where you might not have insulin on board from a breakfast yet, making sure that you've got some hydration, a nice glass of water before you head out the door on a walk or a run or whatever it is. And then having tested your doses of insulin to know that kind of those base settings are in a good place. That's one of the ideal times is first thing in the morning, when a lot of people experience what we call insulin resistance, or a lot less potential for sensitivity. The longer we exercise in the heat, though, the more likely we are to have a drop in our blood sugar. So preparation, bringing along quick carbohydrate or quick sugar sources anytime you're moving, bringing along good hydration, which we focused on already, right? Something to make sure that you're replenishing your sweat loss, essentially. And then knowing the distance or the length of time that you're going to be moving. So while you might try to go out without having had any food in the beginning of the day, what's the length of time you're going to be out? Is it a 20-minute dog walk, or is it a 3-hour hike in the woods?
Mm-hmm.
There involves, again, a little bit more planning and the potential of bringing along what we consider fuel for keeping your muscles kind of moving.
Right. So you said early morning is a good time for exercise. What about like after meals? Is there a benefit to that too?
Yeah. So I can kind of piggyback on what Jenny was saying in that, with diabetes management, nothing is spontaneous. We kind of do need to plan ahead. And so if you're having a meal and knowing that you're going to be active afterwards, it's a really good idea to take less insulin in preparation of that activity. That insulin on board often becomes kind of supercharged insulin as you're starting to increase your activity and maybe go back into the heat. And so planning ahead is just so key, but not always possible, right? And so that's where you can bring some things along, carry some extra carbohydrate replacements, carry, extra things as you go out and do your summer activities. Can be really helpful.
Right. So then I know we talked before a bit about traveling, but maybe we can expand on that a little more and talk about tips for prepping for different types of trips, beach day trips, different things like that, how to manage your blood sugar while traveling in general.
I think one of the biggest things people are concerned about in traveling with diabetes I think it's twofold. One, it's all of your parts and pieces that are more technology, devices, all of that kind of stuff. And then the other category really is there's a lot of, I guess, struggle around the food because the availability of it one place to the next is very likely different than what you're normally doing at home, what you've gotten used to, response of this breakfast versus, gosh, I don't even know what the content of this breakfast is. I guess it's a one guess, right? So I think one of the things that I try to do in the travel time that I have, especially if it's long distance, right? I'm going to be traveling more than about 90 minutes, car, airplane, train, bus, whatever it might be. I make sure that I have some items on me that are my known go-to, easy packable, snacky kinds of things, whether it's a bar that's more like a meal replacement that I know how it impacts my blood sugar. Depending on where you're traveling, you may or may not be able to carry this particular food or that. I know there are more restrictions around fresh type of produce and that kind of stuff. But packaged usually makes its way through on an airplane pretty easily. So packing some things, also having a plan of action maybe when you get there. You're thinking about the difference between an Airbnb or a rental home versus a hotel room. If you have the opportunity to rent a place that's got a kitchen and a refrigerator, by all means, go ahead and do that. Now you have access to getting some groceries or having something delivered. You have some ability to prep. And it means that not all of your meals are a wild guess from just eating wherever it's available. So,
right.
Mm-hmm. Travel is one of my very favorite things to do. And I think that layering in diabetes management can certainly make it seem overwhelming. Especially, I get a lot of questions about what to pack and how to approach technology and supplies. And I do like to overpack generally, but especially for diabetes management. And just like what Jenny was saying, having your go-to snacks can kind of just be really, really helpful that you don't have to stress about being stuck without a good option. But with diabetes technology, I always suggest planning probably 50% more of what you otherwise would take. Just this year alone, I think I've had, 2 or 3 flights just canceled on me. And so you want to make sure that you have enough if you get stuck, and you also have troubleshooting supplies in case your technology fails, whether that be an insulin pump or a continuous glucose monitor. Just having that backups can really help you enjoy your vacation instead of stressing on your vacation.
Yeah. I think another tip for some of that technology, more specific to those people who might use continuous glucose monitors, would even be having a known backup prescription on file with a like a CVS or a Walgreens or even a Costco kind of place that if you're going there and this isn't available, you could potentially, even if you had to pay out of pocket, you could pick it up from a pharmacy, which might bridge the gap between getting home and feeling comfort while you're still on vacation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would take it a step further and oftentimes might suggest, where a 24-hour pharmacy is located, and then make sure that that's, where you have your prescription.
Yeah. And also, I mean, as much as we do with prescriptions and really written orders and that kind of thing. We have the wealth of the diabetes community honestly at our fingertips these days, and it's a thankful thing. I see over and over in the limited number of communities that I follow within, the different online platforms, people saying, hey, I'm stuck in like Houston, and is anybody close within this community? I could really use a new CGM, or I really ran out of my pump supplies or whatever. There are a lot of people who are very willing to say, here you go, I understand. So
it's a great point.
Yeah, such a valuable thing to have like those connections with people all over the world through these like social media communities.
Absolutely.
So segueing, we were kind of talking about this, the diabetes to go bag. Like, what are your must-haves for the summer? Dana, do you have a to-go bag?
Yeah, I mean, it is full of glucose tablets or something that is fast-acting carbohydrates, just in case. I mean, I don't leave home without it, regardless of the temperature outside. Certainly that hydration piece is key, and an extra supply, whether you need a charging cord for your devices, whether you need a continuous glucose monitor that has a calibration need, you would want a glucometer to bring along. And this is usually my rule of thumb is if I'm going to be traveling further than it takes for me to come back home, I want to bring my supplies so I don't ruin an activity or a day. So, bring some extra infusion sets if you're on an insulin pump, certainly your insulin. And we talked about proper storage for that. But I do think people forget the charging aspect quite often. And so we don't want to be somewhere where we're going to run out of battery for whatever devices you're using. And so all of that can be pretty inexpensive to put in a small bag or a tote bag with some snacks in there, and just kind of have easily available for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. As you said, it's not really summer specific or hot weather specific. It's more, there are a lot of families that I know we both work with that have their to-go bag hangs next to the garage door or next to the front door or whatever. And they pick it up just like you'd pick up a purse or your wallet, and it goes out the door. And unless you need something from it, you don't touch anything in the bag. And then when you get home, let's say your sensor did die or your pump site had to be changed or something, then it's okay, I have to replace this today because I took it out of the bag. But otherwise that bag is always packed. It's something that's always ready to go, and you don't really have to even think about it then.
Yeah. And one thing I did not include that I would also have is a way to maybe help my devices stay on longer, especially when it is hot, or if I go swimming for long periods of time or at the beach. Just some overlay patches for devices can be really helpful, so you don't have to stress about keeping things on.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you about next, about like device adhesion during the summer, how sweat, water, sunscreen can affect that, if you want to keep expanding on that.
Yeah, I know Jenny has equally good tips, but we want to start with clean and dry skin. So the time to put on your devices is not after a hot bath or not after you've been swimming for 2 hours. We want to be cool. We want to have that skin be really nice and clean and dry. Alcohol can, wipes can really help with that. And we also want to make sure that we put devices on before any additional lotions go on. So before any body lotion, before any sunscreen, and then there is just a whole host of fun overlay tapes these days. And there's also a whole host of either micro barriers or extra adhesive that you can put under the devices as well. Jenny, I'm sure you can agree. I've not met anybody's skin that we can't help to make things affix to successfully and do the activities that they want to do.
Absolutely. And everybody's skin seems to like one particular product or another. I have, our recommendations abound in the people that we work with. And I have tried some of them from a design standpoint, and I love the designs, but they just don't stay stuck. And I really personally only have some issues in the summertime where we heavily use our community pool. And so in and out of the water. In the wintertime, I don't have a problem. I don't use any additional adhesive. But there are things that I definitely will buy over and over, and then others that I prefer the design, but they really don't stay stuck. So you do have to kind of trial a bunch of different things and see what works the best for you. But drying, you made a great point about really dry, nice, clean skin to apply it first and foremost to get your best adhesion to start with.
Absolutely.
What should someone do if a device starts to loosen or even falls off?
Yeah, so some of these, adhesive, underlays like skin tack is just my favorite go-to. What if you have a little, it's almost like a Band-Aid that kind of peels up, you can reapply that adhesive, extra adhesive to the tape that's already on there and kind of recoat it with the adhesive and put it back on. But there's also overlay tapes you can get. Really, there's just a whole host of varieties, even at the local grocery store or local pharmacy, and then certainly online, like what Jenny was saying, there's lots of different designs, and that should be included in kind of a to-go bag always, because you just never know if you bump into a door frame or somehow you have devices that get bumped, and you can always try to save them to stay on.
Yeah, I know you do yoga the same as I do, Dana. And this time of the year, my hot yoga is much hotter. I feel like sometimes I don't even know why they heat the room because it's
and
super
humid.
exactly. So this again is a time of the year that in my yoga bag, I also have an extra adhesive because there are some times that around the edges just before class, I'm like, if I don't put something extra on this by the end of class, it's going to have sweated itself off of, my arm or whatever. So,
right. And that again, people ought to remember that device companies are aware that life happens. And so if you lose a device and you don't get the full amount of time with that sensor or that insulin pump, please call your manufacturer and have them replace it so you don't lose supplies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important tip. Okay, so just a little prompt for our viewers. Let us know what is personally the hardest part for you about managing your diabetes in the summer, and what tips do you have to share with other viewers? But yeah, so in conclusion, we talked about activity, travel, device adhesion in the heat. We talked about nutrition and hydration. And we do have to wrap up a little early today. But Dana, do you have any closing thoughts for our viewers today?
I would just say that summer is such a fun time of year. I know everyone's a little bit too hot at the moment, but hopefully have some fun plans to, look forward to. And I would never want diabetes to feel like it gets in the way of those activities or put a limitation on that. And so, I would hope that folks feel they have the resources and support in order to enjoy those activities that they're looking forward to. And I know Jenny had alluded to the diabetes community online, but hopefully, everyone feels supported, that there are a lot of resources out there to make sure you feel like you can engage in what you want to do.
Yeah.
How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I think what we talked about really goes, the kind of the base of it is a little bit of preparation goes a long way.
Absolutely.
It's if you have your diabetes to go bag, you don't have to think as much whenever you leave the house. If you have a strategy to the activities you want to build into your summer day, maybe Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you really want to go to your master's swim at your pool at 6 o'clock in the morning. Great. Have a plan of action in place so that you can really enjoy that rather than, gosh, my device fell off because I guess it was a little bit loose to begin with and I didn't, so having that preparatory really makes a very big difference in almost being able to forget about the diabetes and enjoy just the summer activities that you really want to like.
Absolutely.
Well, before we go, I just have to restate our disclaimer that nothing stated today is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Our discussion is for informational purposes only. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have about a medical condition or treatment. Thank you both so much for joining today. It was really great to get your tips and insights on diabetes management in the summer. I think that you shared so many helpful tips, and it's always a pleasure speaking with you both. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in. I hope everyone stays cool and has a great, fun summer. And that's all for today.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.